people think we're teaching video games.
Right.
And that is absolutely not what we're doing. We are using video games as the hook, and we're meeting kids where they're at.
Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the first ever Gaming Concepts podcast. So excited to be here. This is a podcast made for educators by educators. Tossing it over to Dr. Kristen Kraft. She is the 2021 Kansas Principal of the Year and has joined our team in January.
Well, this is super exciting to be here. And, thanks, Mike. And I really love the background music, too, that we got going. It makes us seem like a little extra today. See, I love it. So, really, we're kind of getting this podcast together for the first time. It's kind of our inaugural, kickoff. I thought we might just kind of talk about what exactly, do we want to do on this podcast? What kind of things do we want to bring to people? Who's listening,
Is that a question we're supposed to answer out loud?
Yeah,
you want to be
yeah, talk to me.
Okay, yeah.
Well, yeah, talk to me. And Trevor is the National Digital Principal of the Year, I might add. He is is it 2021? Mike was doing a lot of 20s, so I just want to make sure we have the right number and 2021.
After me, they sundowned the program, so there will be no more.
You're the last.
Principals of the Year from NESSP after me. And,
you are the last.
Two others, so that's right. Here's what I want us to talk about.
Yeah.
I am not a gamer. I love a lot of gamers. I want to be able to talk about why gaming is so good for kids, and I want to help educate other folks who are like me who didn't get it. Now I get it. I didn't get it. And I want to be able to talk about why gaming is and can be so good for kids and how we can help educate others on the benefits of gaming. That's where I want to go.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Mike, I know you're a gamer, though. What do you see as being, the vision of this podcast?
Yeah, I think the vision for me, for all of us, hopefully, is to, make educators more comfortable with the idea of offering scholastic gaming and esports in schools, and break down some of those barriers that I know make educators a little bit timid, and it's difficult to. There's a lot of things that go into setting up a new program, and we want to try to help them and help them get this to their students and educate parents and talk to the parents and bring all this to light so we can show that there is value to scholastic gaming and offering esports competitive teams. So, I hope to be able to share data and just our own stories and how we all got here and how we were able to make this a success in our own areas in our own right and spread this out to, all over the country and all over the world. So
absolutely. I think about how large esports is, gaming, and I think sometimes we're just kind of one of the best kept secrets in what is really $1 billion industry. And so I think the more conversations that we can have about it and really educate people. So,
it's amazing to me. And I know, Kristen, you and I are both relatively new to the gaming world. Mike, you've been here a long time, but how common it is when we talk to people that they have no idea what esports are. They have no idea what competitive gaming looks like, or they have such bad perceptions of it that they don't even want to consider it until we open their eyes, and then all of a sudden they're like, man, this is incredible. Until you start putting like names with it, like, hey, I want you to think about that kid in your school who doesn't quite seem like they have a place. They're probably a gamer. And then all of a sudden you start opening these doors and people are like, dang, okay, there's something really cool here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And hopefully those are some of the stories we'll get to share during this podcast. We'll get to talk about those kids that we've seen the impact on and tell all those stories that we were able to see over, 7 years of us doing this. And, there's so many great stories, and we often just, during a podcast or during a presentation, we just don't have the time to tell all those stories, but those are the stories that really make, help people to understand the value of what we're doing. So this again is just a great way to share that with everyone.
I love the idea of stories. And I think, for me, and I'm not a gamer, I'll be honest, I call myself an OG gamer. Like, I still know my Miss Pac-Man pattern. And I had to drive myself, my parents dropped me off, so to speak, at the mall, to play at the arcade.
To the arcade with quarters.
The arcade, Fun Factory at Oak Park Mall. But some of the obstacles that I think get in our way with really putting this, esports into schools, because it's been around for, quite some time. But I know when I'm talking to people often, and I talk to a lot of, principals, and Trevor, you can speak to this too a little bit, superintendents, athletic directors, boards of education. And there really is kind of a not an understanding. There's a fear of violence in video games. There's a fear of too much screen time for kids. And I think we have to kind of break down some of those myths as well.
Yep.
And help people really understand that scholastic pipeline, what esports is actually teaching, around teamwork. I think they don't understand that this is now about scholarships. This is now about, going into the industry and just how many jobs. So when, parents are saying even to kids, you can't get a job in esports, kids are laughing because you can.
Yeah, they can make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, my job didn't exist a year ago. So, we got a whole, team of over 100 people at Generation Esports that can definitely say, well, no, I do work in esports, and there's a lot. You don't even have to be a gamer to do it. So that's kind of what I'm excited about, just talking about and really educating people on the myths and the misconceptions too. I think it's going to be a great part of this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I started in the arcade just like you, Kristen. That's where I got my my exposure to gaming. But my dad used to give me $5 for an A, $3 for a B, and $2 for a C on my report card. And at the end of the 9 weeks, I'd take my $2. I'll let you do the math. And I would go to the arcade and make $30 on a weekend, just betting kids that I could beat them on games. So that was how I generated revenue back in the day. So
well played.
You were hustling, man. You were hustling.
I was
Mike.
hustling. Yeah, I was. I got pretty good at some of those games, and eventually the competition ran out. But they learned. But so that's just my fun little story about arcades. So
yes, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Dr. Kristy Custer to the show. Dr. Custer, hello. How are you today?
Hello, Kristy.
I am so good. I'm so excited that I am your very first guest on your very first episode of your podcast.
Yay.
Thank you
Yes.
for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Good to have you. Okay, so we're gonna go back before esports.
Yes.
For a little bit.
Yes.
So I want you, Dr. Custer, take yourself back to little Kristy Custer running around the farm, picking pumpkins in central Kansas somewhere, and give us kind of your story into education. What led you to get an education? Because you were not always the esports lady. You didn't always have your name on a book or a couple books. And you didn't always know Mike Russell, the co-author. Right. So I want to know, take us back to the origin story of Dr. Kristy Custer.
Oh, I can't wait.
Wow.
I can't wait.
That takes me back a long time. So I have wanted to be a teacher since I was 5. My folks say that I have 3 brothers. 2 of them are younger. They're both 4 years apart. So one brother's 4 years younger and one brother is 8 years younger than me. And I have always been the teacher. And so when my younger brother was probably 4 and I was 8, I would do school. We would play school, and I would do parent-teacher conferences. Nice. And I would make worksheets. And I always wanted to be a teacher, and it never really swayed. I kind of wanted to be Barbara Walters, if you guys remember Barbara Walters. So this is very exciting that I get to be on the podcast because I feel a little bit like Barbara. And I kind of wanted to be a lawyer a little bit, but it always came back to education and always came back to teaching. And so I went to college for education, became a high school English teacher like I always knew I would. My, major influence in my life as far as education was my high school English teacher, Mrs. Rowan, Sharon Rowan. She was an absolute rock star English teacher, and that made me want to be a teacher. And I was a really good writer, and I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed reading. And so I actually started out in a traditional school in McPherson, Kansas, and I spent 4 years there. But my husband was at Kansas State University to become an airline pilot. And so when he graduated, we needed to be closer to an airport. So we moved to Wichita, and there was a job opening in a district, Mays. And Mays is was and still is one of the premier districts in Kansas. And they are a fantastic, very progressive
Yes.
district. They do a lot of cool things. They let their teachers do a lot of cool things. And so I thought, I want to be in that district. But the only position open for an English teacher was at the alternative school. And so I went down there. I had zero desire to be at the alternative school.
I did not realize
I went down
this.
there for, it's new story.
This is new.
Story.
Yeah.
So I went down there and, like every good conscientious interviewee, I went down there and to find out, like the day before, it was about an hour away from where I was at. And I was actually living in Salina at the time. And I wanted to find out where it was at so I knew where to go and I could be on time. And my husband was with me and we drove around and all we could find were these like mobile homes, these red mobile homes. And I'm like, where is the school? Yeah, the school was these red mobile homes. So there are 3 red mobile homes and they were connected by a wooden pathway. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is the school. And so I even wanted less to be at the alternative school, but I really wanted to be in Maine.
District. It's the premier
What
district.
time of year was this? Was this like in the summer?
No, this was actually in February because this is one of the reasons why I decided that I would take the position was because I like to plan. I'm a planner. I like to know what I'm going to do. This is one of the reasons why I like education is because, I know what I'm going to do August 15th. You pretty much know what you're going to do October 27th and December 13th. And in education. So anyway, I went down in February and I interviewed for this position. The people were outstanding. I mean, they were wonderful. The kids, it was very surprising. The kids interviewed me. So I walk in, they take me on this little tour. There's one bathroom in the place.
I love that.
The books are hand-me-down books. Everything in that building or in those 3 mobile homes was hand-me-down.
Yeah, mobile units.
Yeah, they had from the books to the furniture, everything there was hand-me-down. But I met the staff and they were outstanding. The students were very professional, except for one thing. One of the students asked me, where I was from. And I said, Garden Plain. And she happened to know something about Garden Plain. It's a very Catholic town. She knew some people there and she goes, "Are you Catholic?"
Yeah. In an interview.
And I go, "Can you ask me that?" Like I just shot that right back at her. I was like, "Can you ask me that?" Having fun, but I mean that was just that's kids. That's what you get. And the Deb Elliott, she was in the interview. She was our principal at the time. She started the school. And she just, her eyes got really big. And, after the student left, she just said, this is what we get sometimes when we deal with students. And so I didn't really want to be there, but I thought, you know what, I can do anything for a year. And
I didn't really want to be there.
So I decided to accept the position at the alternative school for at-risk kids. And it was in its second year. The program was in its second year. And I ended up staying for 20 years. Because I freaking love those kids and it'll make me emotional. And it is right now. Kids would often come to me and they'd say, "I hate school." And I'd be like, "Okay, you hate school, but what do you like?" And they'd say, "I like welding or I like auto mechanics or I like fishing." And I'm the English teacher. So they really hate English class. And so they would be like, "I'm not writing this 5-paragraph essay and we're the dropout prevention school." And I was like, "Okay, you don't want to write a 5-paragraph essay, but can you write a work order for like how to fix a transmission?" And so, all of a sudden their eyes would light up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're interested in me. You're interested in what I do." And they'd come back 15 minutes later, 2 hours later, and there would be pages of information. And so as an English teacher, I had a jumping off point.
Yeah.
I had a jumping off point with the kid. But not only did I have a jumping off point with the kid, I made a connection with the kid. Mm-hmm. And so through the years, it was very labor intensive where we had to for every kid, we started to individualize what we called contracts. And we would use the standards, but then we would take those standards and we would write them so that it was something that the kids were interested in. And so that was like I said, very labor intensive. And then over the last probably 6 or 7 years, we would have these kids that would come in. I hate school. What do you like? Well, I like video games. And so that became a thing, is that we would write, we wanted to write more contracts that had to do with video games. The problem is I didn't know very much about video games, and not a lot of our staff knew very much about video games. So that's kind of where I got started in education, and Complete High School Maze was a huge part of that. My husband was a huge part of that because, he had a hard time growing up. And so that's kind of where I came from.
So all of that kind of builds the structure to drive so much of who you are right now, and the passion you have for kids, and for, like you said before, kind of fighting for those have-nots. But the crazy thing is we know this industry that we are all involved in is rapidly becoming viewed as not those kids out there, but the ones that are sought after, and the ones that are being recruited and being drawn into some significant industries because of the skills they have. And that's kind of the exciting thing. And I want to get to Mike here real quick, because Mike, you're kind of the next piece to this puzzle. And so, Kristy, give us a little bit about Dr. Mike Russell and how he kind of he kind of continued in this journey with you at Maze Complete High School, because all along you're doing your education thing, Mike's over there doing his thing, and you guys are both kind of parallel paths, but I mean, on a way into this kind of crazy collision course that you probably never saw coming. And Mike, your path in education is not the same. I got a feeling you did not dream of being a teacher when you were a young Mike Russell running around in central Kansas as well, but you found your way there. So kind of quickly tell your story, Mike, for how you got an education. And then I want to know, Kristy, how you got a hold of this greatness. So Mike, you first on your quick story, Mike, how you got the education.
I actually did want to be a teacher when I was younger. And the reason I didn't become a teacher is because someone who I respected and was kind of an authority figure in my life said, teachers don't make money. And that immediately in my mind said, well, in order for me to be successful, I have to make money. So that's a lot of the reason why I didn't pursue it.
Boom.
But, as I went through my career, I did think about becoming a teacher because my experience in school was not stellar. It was not great. I was a horrible student, actually. And but I always thought I could do it better. And eventually I got to a place in my life where I thought, and my wife was very supportive. She's been a teacher for 22, 23 years now, and was very supportive of me going back to school and doing that. And so I went back to college and got my teaching license. And just through a random circumstance where I was student taught, the lady that I was one of my cooperating teachers went to high school with Kristy in Norwich, America, 60 kids in the whole school.
Wow.
And was like, hey, there's an opening at Complete High School, the alternative school. My kids have been in Maze their whole life. I had never once heard of Complete High School.
Wow, really?
I didn't even know it was a thing. My kids went to school next to Complete High School, and I still didn't know it was what it was.
Wow.
So it was a kind of an interesting journey there. And then I applied. They were looking for a social studies teacher at the time. I was licensed in business to business teach. So I applied for the job and then immediately signed up to take the praxis for social studies, which thankfully I passed because I did get an interview. Kristy called me. And I'm very famous for not answering phone numbers I don't know when they call me. And my wife's like, you probably should answer that. And my wife's mostly right all the time.
All the time. So, she is right all the
as
time.
Most wives are.
Yes.
And
well played.
It happened to be Kristy. And Kristy was like, hey, would you like to come in for an interview? We talked for like an hour and a half. So at Complete High School, the interview starts pretty much before you get to the door. So I got there and there were some people picking weeds outside, our science teacher at the time, and some kids. And I chatted with them for a few minutes and then went inside and the kids greeted me as I went in, and then they immediately start taking you on a tour of the building. Well, they're checking for things like, do you turn off the lights as you go through the school? Do you open the doors for people? One of the kids was struggling, which I found out later they weren't really struggling, but to move a cooler, and they were wanting to see if I would offer to help move the cooler. Just the whole process started immediately. So, which I didn't know. I was just, they're just checking your character to make sure you're the kind of person they want. And after that, it made total sense once I figured that out. And, so get you in there for the interview. Kristy mentioned that you're interviewed by students. What really happens is, so Kristy and Michelle, the assistant principal, were in there. There's 3 students. About probably 10 minutes into the interview, Kristy and Michelle get called away for an emergency. So they leave.
Oh,
they leave you with the kids by yourself.
I love this.
To talk to them. Well, thankfully, I had something in common with all the kids. I was a gamer, and they were all gamers.
So, okay, hold on. How did that conversation start? Because I never would have think to just say, "Hey, do you play video games?" So how did that part happen, Mike?
Well, I think one of the questions they asked me is like, we got to talking about some cool trips I'd been on or something. I think was one of the questions. Okay. Later, Kristy asked me a question, and then that's when the gaming piece really came up. But I had talked to the kids, and I've been to BlizzCon 6 times, which is a video game convention. And one of the kids immediately was like, "Oh, that's so cool. I'm a huge StarCraft 2 player." And then the other kid was like, "Oh, I play this." And the other kid was like, "Oh, my brother plays this." She wasn't a gamer, but she knew everything about gaming. So through that process, we started to talk, and we just, were chit-chatty the whole time.
Did that just change your whole dynamic of the interview once you kind of moved into that piece?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. It was awesome for me because, I'm always about finding that one connection with anybody. So if we have one thing we can talk about, we're going to be in pretty good shape, at least, for the short term. And then as we get to know each other, we'll have more things to talk about. But when you only have, 15, 20 minutes to make an impression, and you're not really sure what happened, because in my mind, I'm like, well, there's an emergency. Like, should I be doing something about the emergency, or am I supposed to sit here this whole time? I don't know what's supposed to happen. Right. So, but no, they leave you in there for 15, 20 minutes, and you come back in and really just kind of fire up the interview again. And they, each of the kids had asked me a few questions, and then, Kristy and Michelle came back in, and Kristy, asked me one question. I'll let you take it from that part from there. And then I want to tell about when I was actually offered the job. I like that.
Let's play that out.
So you can see how complete high school plays into this whole deal. I mean, how important and how school-centric, I think, student-centric we were there. And that's, as you look into the gaming concepts, the books and everything we do with gaming concepts, it's just totally about the student.
Yeah.
And whenever we're writing it, we think about what is the experience the student is going to have while they're doing this. And so I think that's kind of fun, because that's complete high school. It's so student centric, and everything we do is from the point of view of what is the experience the kid is going to have here? Is it going to be a positive experience? Is it going to be a growth experience? And, my experience interviewing 20 some years ago, Mike's interview experience, that was our experience, and it's very meaningful to both of us. But to those kids, what a learning experience that is for those kids. I mean, they understand, how important it is to make a good impression. And that's why I told Mike, none of the other candidates asked me how they should dress. And I told Mike, because our kids had been trained, you dress like that because that's the expectation of our kids. They are going to expect you to come to a professional job dressed professionally. So anyway, Mike does forget there's a couple of things that he leaves out here. When I walked in to save him, we'd been gone for probably 15 minutes. But when I walked in, we had to wait 10 or 15 more minutes for the kids to be done talking to him about gaming, esports and gaming. And what happens at that part of the interview is if I walk in and there is no talking, or you can feel the discomfort, either from the students. The interview is pretty much over, and we practice with the kids. We have this list of 15 or 20 questions, and we jump from question 2 to question 20 real fast. The interview's over real quickly, and I could tell that the kids really like Mike, and that's so important. Kids have to like you. You can't teach kids and have them in a school environment and them not like you. And I'm not saying they have to be friends with you,
Right.
but there has to be a mutual respect, or there has to be something where the kids, they care about you, or at least they know you care about them. So,
Well, it's that age old, I don't know, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care piece.
And kids
Trevor,
know
it's
when
so true.
kids know when a teacher doesn't like them, and they never even have to say it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So was
Well,
that
and
like if you go back to Mike having the conversation with those kids, is that where gaming concepts, like if you really get to the core of it, is that where it started right there in that moment with those kids?
Not yet. It's the next
Okay.
question.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I think,
Okay.
Mike.
So
I don't know. What do you?
get,
I think
get
no,
us
it's
to this next
I agree.
question here. Get us this next
the
question here.
next.
Go for that.
Okay, so once again, at Complete High School, we have teacher passion projects. We think kid passion projects are fantastic, and there's a lot of, there's that kid-centric thing again. But when you get a teacher passionate about something, the kids will just gravitate toward it. So we had a student store at a retirement home. That was one of the teachers, her passion project. She had a little general store, and the kids ran it. She was the math teacher. We had a community garden. We had a very robust tutoring program that we had. And these were all, the teacher was the facilitator, but the kids were the doers. And so it became, project-based learning, but it was because the teacher, that was their thing. And so, I told Mike about these things, and I get to the question, and I say, what do you think your teacher passion project would be? And it was probably the only part in the interview where Mike got a little bit uncomfortable, because he's looking at these two, myself and my assistant principal, middle-aged women. And he's like, man, everything's going so good. You could go with the safe, whatever the safe was, or I can be real. And Mike chose to be real. And it was almost embarrassed, shy. He goes, well, I really like video games. And I think my passion project would be video games. And, he kind of is like, oh crap, is this the right thing or the wrong thing to say? And I immediately knew this is going to be gold. For our school, this is going to be gold, because we'd already had those kids. I hate school. What do you like? I like video games. I just knew that this was going to be.
So you knew you'd heard the chatter from the kids with that previously. So that was already kind of on your mind a little bit, Kristy?
Well, actually, what put it on my mind is there's another story, and this is a mom story, because, most importantly, I am the principal, I am a teacher, but most importantly, I'm a mom. And I now have an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And so I don't play video games, but I'm immersed in video game stuff all the time. And what had happened probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years prior to this meeting with Mike, it was a beautiful spring day, and I go stomping down into the basement where my son, Christian, who's now 18, is down there. And he's got his headset on, and he's playing video games for 3 hours or 5 hours or 45 hours. I don't know. And, I do what moms do. I start yelling at him, Christian, video games are terrible for you, and you're wasting your life away, and it's beautiful outside, and you should be outside. And Christian looked up at me, and I say, he is a good kid. I mean, we just sent him off to boot camp, and this is a good kid. And he looked up at me, and he goes, Mom, this is what my friends and I like to do, and this is what we like to do together. He said, if I were playing basketball for 3 hours, if I were reading for 3 hours, if I were practicing my tuba for 3 hours, would you be mad at me? Oh. And I was like, that's where I realized I'm not belittling video games. I'm belittling my child.
Him.
And I was like, what a great question. Why is it that I freaking hate video games and that I think they're a waste? And why is that? And what I recognized is that video games are not in school. Basketball's in school, reading's in school, band is in school. I can't find value in this because society, especially at that time, does not give this value. Well, first, one of my students, Mike, had to get the phone call, and so Mike,
Yeah.
you got to
Yes.
tell the story.
Okay.
Just
Yep.
finish out
Sorry,
the interview.
this is the fun part for me, Trevor. So
going.
Yes.
I have to finish this story out. So I did apply at one. I only applied at one other place, and I applied at my alma mater, and they did not hire me, which did not surprise me because I was a terrible student, and they probably remembered that.
Mistake.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, actually, it was the right thing because it allowed this
It
to
was
happen.
great. No,
Well,
it worked out fantastically. Exactly.
True.
So I'm getting a little nervous at this point because it's been a week since I had my interview with Kristy, probably, and all the kids. And I was out mowing my yard. I'll never forget. I was mowing my yard and thinking, man, I hope I get a call, because that's kind of when I do my thinking, is when I'm mowing, and phone rings, and I'm like, that might be that might be complete high school. I didn't know the number memorized or anything, but it was the right area code and everything. And so I answered it, and person goes, "Is this Mike?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Hey, this is Dylan at Complete High School." And I said, "Hey, Dylan, how are you?" And then he goes, "Do you want to work here?" I said, "Yeah, that would be awesome." He goes, "Okay, thanks, bye."
That's it. That's all you got.
I was like, well, I guess this is I guess maybe somebody will call me later. I don't know. So
did you finish mowing? Did you stop and go tell your wife? Like, what did you do?
Actually, I put it back in my pocket, and I thought, well,
do I have the job?
I guess that's how that goes, and maybe somebody else will call me. So I just kept mowing.
An education, but okay.
Best offer
So I was like, okay, hey, Trevor, I've never been hired in education before. I don't know how this works.
Okay, is this
typical?
Is this like normal? Right. I don't know. Maybe that's what they do. This is not my thing. So I just kept mowing, and a little bit later, Kristy called me back and kind of went through the process of what needs to happen. But it was the best phone call ever in my life. I'll never forget Dylan Osborne. He is an amazing kid.
Yep.
Still is amazing. Still talk to him. And, he didn't get to take advantage of the gaming concepts and all the gaming we did, but he came back and visited and was like, man, I can't believe you all got this done.
So cool.
And so he's very great, but yeah, it's a great story. I love to tell that story.
Love it.
That's awesome.
We had a whole script and he panicked. There was a whole script and he panicked. So anyway, so Mike got hired, and that over the summer he wrote some contracts up, and I told him, in the phone call, I said, the gaming thing I think is gold. And so I said, your biggest hang up here is going to be money. In an education, that's always the biggest hang up is money. And Mike is a go-getter, still is a go-getter, has always been a go-getter. And so I said, you get the money together and I will support you in whatever you come up with, because that's how it worked at our school is you get the money together and I'll bulldoze whatever it takes to get it. And so Mike found out, and this is still true today for anybody who's listening, thinking about starting a video gaming, needs a lab or something. He found out that every Walmart store can give you $500 without having to go outside of the store. The store manager can authorize a $500 grant to any school. Mike wrote 40 grants to Walmart.
I love this.
And that is how we got our lab and how we got our program started.
Walmart's and a few others, but yes, mostly Walmart's. Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
How many cities? How many Walmarts? I'm curious.
Well, since we're located in Wichita,
there's a lot.
I think I wrote within. I think I picked like a 60-mile radius and just wrote.
That is brilliant. Where there's a will, there's a way. That is brilliant.
That is.
Passion. That's chasing the passion because it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
And so then, once he, got the lab going, and the Mesa Educational Foundation, they could see the value in it. Also, they had something called an innovative grant. And so they gave us an innovative grant also. And Mike just started teaching out of his head. It was like out of Mike's head. And he would take business standards, because remember, we have the contract situation. And so he would take business standards and he would apply them to gaming, and they would play video games, and I would often walk by and Mike would be playing video games because he was the best gamer there. And so the kids would want to beat him. And so I'd be like, working hard, Mike. And he was, but we played with the high school esports league, and they were relatively, probably 5 years in, but they were really kind of picking up traction at the time. And they found out that we were teaching this as a class, and our district could see the connection to standards so well that they allowed us to teach it for a business credit. And, in my mom brain and my administrator brain, I'm like, okay, now it has value.
Yeah.
And isn't that sad that we have to attach value to things that people love to do? And I knew people love to do this, that we got value. And so I'm on this meeting with Charlie and Mason from, the high school esports league. And I say, we'll write this curriculum, but it's very labor intensive. And I don't want to do this unless I know that other people really want this, because I know that we want this at Complete High School, but is this transferable to traditional school? And so I said, we'll do 10 lessons. You send it out to your teachers. And if you get some positive feedback, we'll do a course. And so we sent them Mike and I worked on the lessons, and, things that we thought that teachers would like, things that we thought that kids would like. We sent it to Mason and Charlie. They sent it out. And within like 4 hours, Mike, how many responses did they get?
Well, they originally told us about 500, but I found out later that they may have exaggerated that number a little bit because they wanted us to do it anyway.
Well played.
So that was us being naive and not knowing.
That is great.
So they were on top of it.
Oh man!
But 500 is what they told us. I think it was actually about 300, which is still
amazing.
It's still an amazing amount. At the time, I think they were in 600 schools when we met them. So that was a really big portion of even just the schools they were in. So
wow.
So the whole writing process, it came together, and what happened with that is that we came up with a list. So we looked at the standards that we wanted. We came up with a list of, all kinds of it. We didn't want it to just be gaming because we wanted it to be, more than just gaming. We knew we needed to capture a lot of people, or a lot of things. So we did some technical type things. We did gaming type things. We did social emotional type thing, just a lot of stuff in there. And the way that we wrote it was I would write the technical things because I didn't know that. And so I would write it in a way that I thought, although many, and especially at that time, gamers were male, teachers, as we know, 80% of teachers are female. Mm-hmm. And so that gaming concepts is written for this teacher right here.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge gamer, but I love kids, and I can see the value of this, and I want to reach kids. And so anyway, flash forward a little bit. And so we ended up writing the book, and Mason and Charlie drove down, and they were, they're still young. I still call them kids, but they were really young at the time. And they may have even had to borrow somebody's car to get down here.
Oh, I love it.
I'm pretty sure they borrowed Charlie's dad's car.
And Mike and I are professional, and I just thought they were so super sweet. They were trying to be professional too. And Mike and I were really excited. We ended up getting it all printed out, and we bound got the coil bound and everything. And I gave it to Mason in the parking lot, and his eyes got about that big. And that guy did not know what he had, but he knew he had something, and he was super excited about it. And they ended up taking us out for lunch, and they paid. And I know that they couldn't afford to pay at the time. I know that they could not afford to pay, but they paid for us to go out to lunch, and they just were very grateful. And Mason said they were just driving back and they were just looking through it, and they were like, what do you think we have? Because remember the story about the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
So Mason was like, you're just giving this to us? And I'm like, yep, we're just going to give it to you. But I said that there's one caveat to this. You can have this, but you cannot sell this. Because I don't want this. I know what kids need this. And these are the have-nots, because I have a whole building of them.
Yeah.
And you can't get this into school if this is going to cost big money, especially back then, when it was so new.
And people weren't sold on it yet. Yeah.
Right. And they didn't see the value of it yet. And we had to show value, and we had to work really hard to get this out there right. And so he was like, okay, we won't sell it. But then he said on the way back, he was like, well, what are we going to do with it? And so I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this little company called Microsoft.
Oh, I think,
Yes. So they happen to be
Tiny.
in talks with Microsoft because Microsoft was getting interested in esports.
Mm-hmm.
And so we happened to kind of be right place, right time. Went down to a conference, more right place, right time, because we met the right people, and we had our little book, our little bound book.
Yep.
And Microsoft ended up having us write a course on their Microsoft educator community. And we, wrote a course explaining, what esports is, what it can do, why you would want this in your school. And that dang thing ended up getting downloaded 400,000 times in 40 countries.
It was amazing.
It was like the number one downloaded or, taken course for a long time on the Microsoft educator community. The only thing that even remotely competed with it was Minecraft stuff.
Oh my.
Yes. And so
I think that's a good kind of a transition point to get us to the next person that we need to make sure we talk about. And that is the one, the only Kristen Kraft. So Kristy, I'm going to come back to you. Here, Kristy. So give us like the version of how you got a hold of Dr. Kristen Kraft, Kansas Principal of the Year, to join an esports company. Give us that story here.
We go way back, don't we, Kristy?
We do. We go back to May.
No, I don't want to know. I don't want to know your childhood stories. Like I just want to know your well, maybe I don't know. Mike, do we want to know those things?
Well, we didn't know each other.
Most of those things.
Oh, you know those stories, Mike. Okay.
We didn't know each other in childhood.
Okay, good. Whew.
No, it comes back to Mays. It comes back to the beauty of a progressive district, and good people want to work in a good district. Good people want to work where, they're going to be valued, and they want to work somewhere where they know they're going to make a difference and that they're going to be allowed to do progressive things. And so Kristen was actually working at Mays Middle School. She was a middle school principal there, and that's how I got to know her. And then I roped Kristen into the doctoral program. Mike mentioned his doctoral program. I actually got a group of people from Mays together. And this goes back to complete high school again. I was often asked if I had any teaching licensure, any teaching credentials. People would always ask, do you teach?
Wow.
Are you a teacher? Do you have any college education? Because they did not value alternative school like they value traditional school. And I always thought it would be super funny if I, because I was going to stay at complete high school my whole life. And I always thought it was super funny if I would get my doctorate. And so like one of the, most well-educated persons in the district would be at the alternative school. And I would think my students were going to be real proud of that. And they were real proud of that.
Yeah.
But I wanted a group. I wanted a cohort to go with me. And so I sent out, hey, I'm going to start this. Does anyone else want to start this? And got a great group of people.
Well, and can I insert myself here, because You wanted a group of people to get doctorates. I just wanted friends. And it was a really cool group. I had just moved there.
That's an
And
expensive friend, Kristen.
I'm like, I think I'm going to do this because I like those people. And that's literally why I did my doctorate. That's how I joined. And I have really good friends from it as a result. But yeah, I'm still paying on the friendship. So, every day.
So we went through this, and what I found out about Kristen is she's very personable. She's very lovable. And Kristen, ever since I've known her, she has always had kind of a side gig.
Yes.
Whether it was she sells wine, she sells jewelry,
I've done it all.
Can sell you. She sells to kids. She sells,
I sell to kids.
Oh boy.
What am I selling to kids?
Oh boy, what are you selling to kids, Kristen? We probably ought to clarify what that is before we go any further.
But people they gravitate toward her. They love her. And, she fulfills a need. She finds out what people need, and then she wants to provide that service to them, whatever that is, whether that's wine or jewelry, or both. And so she has always,
or a job.
Yeah. So she's always just been, she's one of the helpers. I love that, look for the helpers, even in tragedy, you'll always find the helpers. And Kristen has always been, from Mays Middle School, the whole time I've known her, she's been one of the helpers. And so when I decided to make the leap to Generation Esports and, looked around, and then we needed to have people who could present this to schools and fulfill a need that schools have, and they might not even know they have it. I immediately thought of Kristen. Immediately said, I know who's going to be great at this. And so I called her up and I said, you know what? I think you would be great at this. I'm doing this esports thing. I'm loving it. And she was kind of like me. She's like, I'm going to be in education forever. And I said, you're still in education.
Yeah,
you still are. You're working with teachers. You're working with administrators every day, and you're making a difference. And so I called her.
She called me, mid-December, and I was in education, and, leaving education in the middle of the year is not always the easiest thing to do. And like Kristy, this is the first fall that I have not gone to school since I was a kindergartner. So that's 45 years of starting school in the fall. And when I got the call, the way you actually described it, Kristy, was you said, I hope you don't find this offensive. I hope you aren't offended by this, but I would really like you to do this job. And I thought, okay, I'm not offended. I'm actually very honored, and you just said some very kind things. But it's pretty interesting when you have to tell your principal, in the middle of the year, hey, by the way, I'm going to be leaving. But my principal self, kind of set in, and I said, here's some people you could hire, and things like that. But I have, loved it coming on ever since January, because I do think that, I too know what's good for kids. And I do think that we have to be able to sometimes talk to principals and superintendents and boards and help them really understand the value of it, which is really how I first met Trevor. And when I got the job, I actually, had called him because he was going to be on my podcast that I was doing. And he was totally like, oh, what's this esports thing you're doing? He was like, not having it.
Nah.
So
nope. Not doing it. My parents didn't like it. They thought it was going to send me straight to hell if I played video games. So we were not allowed growing up.
Yep. And so he was not somebody I convinced right away. And then we fast forwarded to April, right?
Well, you did April. A demo for my school in January of this past year.
Well, that's true.
Yep. And that was my first introduction to Generation Esports, is when you did a little demo for the school, because I was going to try to bring esports to my school after meeting you. I'm like, okay, well, at least take a look at it. But yeah, a lot of life happened for me between January and April. A lot of life happened, and that was definitely pivotal in even creating a mindset that was willing to consider anything else. And yeah, fast forward to April. There you and I are at the NASSP Principal of the Year event. You're there as the Kansas State Principal of the Year. I'm there as the National Digital Principal of the Year. And I just found out I was going to open a brand new middle school in a year and a half. And so Spring Hill Schools was getting ready to do a third middle school, and I had been named the principal of that new middle school. Kind of in a, and I don't know if it was a kind of a weird twist there, but the school district released their magazine article in which I had a full page spread all about Trevor Goertzen opening a new middle school that came out like 3 days after I announced my resignation to come join Generation Esports.
Oh my.
So I still actually have that magazine article I keep with me as a reminder. People still have it because that's the last magazine that Spring Hill put out, was the one with me on a full page spread about opening a new school. So whoops, my bad. But yeah, I was in a place where it was about time for me to consider looking at something different. And Kristy, you had made the comment about Kristen being a helper and seeing people's need. As Kristen and I talked when we were in Washington, D.C., she must have sensed something. She must have sensed that there was a need that I had. And you know, I during the conference, I'd actually left the conference early one day because I was so just not in a good place. And I'd actually gone up and looked to see about sabbatical policies. And I was like, I'm going to take a sabbatical. Like I'm just going to take a year off. The weight of the principalship was more than I could continue to endure as a man and a husband and a father. And so I was like, I'm going to do something different. So I went up to my room and I took a nap and had the weirdest dream in the world. Where I kept falling through a glass bridge, and I could never make my way across that glass bridge because I couldn't see what was ahead of me, and I kept falling. Well, I wake up to a text message from Kristen saying, "Hey, where are you?" And my immediate thought was, I'm in trouble because I left the workshop and someone was looking for me and I wasn't there. And she was, "We need to talk tonight." I'm like, okay. And so then that night, she says, "What do you think about coming to work for Generation Esports?" And I if I didn't cry, I'm pretty sure I was starting to cry because I'm like, that is an absolute answer to prayer. I called my wife immediately. I'm like, "Honey, you will never believe what just happened." And it was a whirlwind from there. I mean, that night ignited a rapid progression of interviews and conversations. And within a week, I was standing in front of my superintendent saying, I'm going to resign. I'm out. I'm going to resign. Best part about that was both my two superintendents came up and gave me a hug and said, "Congratulations. We're so proud of you. Good luck. We wish you the best." And I couldn't, that was my most nervous part, was what am I walking away from? I've spent 17 years in education. I've been a principal for 6. I'm getting ready to open a brand new building. I've just been named a National Principal of the Year, and I'm going to go work in esports. That's what I'm going to go do. And the reaction I got from people was just so overwhelmingly, "Good luck. We're excited for you. Go change lives." And I truly believe we are changing lives with what we're doing. I have absolutely no doubt. One of the coolest things, though, is after I'd announced to my school and kind of made it public that I was leaving, I had 2 parents come up to me who are both professional streamers. And they had never been telling people that they're professional streamers because they're a little bit embarrassed by it. And they said, when I took the job to go into esports to help validate their careers, because if Trevor is going to go do it, if he's going to leave being a principal in education to go work in esports, then I can be okay with what I'm doing, and I can be more public about what I'm doing.
Wow.
And that was just one of those moments that made me go, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we have a lot of work.
We have a lot of work to do in esports, because if you're in it, you're in it, you get it. But if you're not, you don't.
You just don't know.
I wasn't there. I don't think, Kristen, you were there. Kristy, you weren't there. But once you see it, once you meet the Mike Russells of the world and you start hearing those stories about the kids, you're like, man, this is good. This is good for kids. This is good for kids. We got to get into this. And so I stepped away. I took a massive leap of faith, just like the rest of you.
Yep.
Made a huge career change at a prime time in my life. But man, there has not been a moment of doubt, not a moment of doubt since I stepped away. And so just like you, Kristen, this year is my first time, and I'm not quite as old as you guys, but My first time in a few years to not be going back to school in August. But doggone it, this is awesome. I still talk to educators every single day. I still talk to school leaders every single day, and I'm still getting to help kids every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nothing but a godsend. And as Kristen, as I've told you before, you saved my life more than you'll ever know. And so, and the crazy thing is, Kristy and Kristen, when I had started my podcast a couple years ago, so I did a podcast for 4 years where I interviewed school principals across Kansas. Someone had said, you got to get a hold of one of these two ladies from Wichita. I didn't know which one it was because I was mixing up my Kristys and my Kristens. And so I was like, I don't know who. I just know there's these pretty important ladies in Wichita who are both principals. And you need to talk to these gals. And so I just picked Kristen because that was the first one I could track down. And she was on my podcast.
And it was probably supposed to be Kristy the whole time.
It was probably supposed to be Kristy the whole time. And she was so doggone good that I was like, I'm good. I don't want to go any further here. But no, I mean, that just kind of adds to the story that we all have about what brought us together is just those invisible threads over the course of time that have tied us together. And there's so many cool, crazy connections that if we had more time, we would circle back up with. But ultimately, like, to me, it makes me go, this is a greater calling and greater purpose we're doing here.
Yeah.
And even as we all have individual stories that brought us together, it's the same thing with Generation Esports. Like everything, as I've gotten to know this company for 2 months, everyone's kind of got this cool connection that comes back to a deeper calling and a higher purpose for what they're doing. And that's why I feel like we're on such a great path. So it's just, it's good. It's good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. I think we have to pivot now. I think we got to pivot now. Kristen, I think you got something fun for us to do here.
Well, I think first though, we're going to where can we get a hold of people on social? So like, Kristy, are you on any social media? And Mike, how about you? And how can they learn about and connect to Gaming Concepts if they want to know more about that? Where would they go?
Sure. So first of all, we have a website. You know, we've gone from Microsoft to our own website now.
Nice.
So we are on gamingconcepts.gg. You can find us. You can find me at KG Custer, Custer on Twitter.
Nice. How about you, Mike?
You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, so just Michael Russell, and then you can find me on Twitter at Russ the Teach. That's I still keep my Twitter handle the same. I didn't change it because we're still educators, and I stand by that. So
I love it. And how about you, Trevor? Where can they find you on social media? Since it's our first one, let's let people know where we're at too.
Yeah, definitely. Mainly on Twitter at Goertzen_edu, but also on LinkedIn. A lot of good stuff on LinkedIn. You just kind of search me up on LinkedIn. And I am not on any other social media platforms that I'm going to publicly talk about.
Okay, perfect. And I am on Twitter mainly. Kristen Esports is what my Twitter handle is. And again,
very creative, Kristen. Very creative.
Thank you. It took a long time to think about. But again, Gaming Concepts, GG, check it out. We want people to learn about it. And once you get on that site, you can be connected to somebody. Is that correct? That'll help out with educating you about it and doing whatever we need to do to help support you and your schools and your kids, because that's what we're about. We're here to normalize esports and education.
Yes.
And we're just so glad Kristy came on today and told her story, and glad that she hired Mike.
I am too. I'm very glad she hired me.
Hired Russ the Teach.
Yep.
Teach.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me today, and good luck with your podcast. I can't wait to see the special guests you're having. Anybody coming up that we know about yet, or you guys still
I think we should keep it a surprise each week.
Okay.
I think that would be kind of fun, you know.
We've got some ideas. We got some ideas
cooking.
Good.
And you'll be back sometime too. I mean, we'll have you on because you're kind of a big deal.
Cool.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see everybody again next time.
All right.
Bye-bye. All right.
Bye.